It's about game time, so we better get ready. I'm Dr. Dick Sander with over 25 years being an NCAA Division I athletic director, and I'm here from the locker room with former Atlantic head coach Mike Smith. Mike Smith, a three-time NFL Coach of the Year, and myself are going to discuss many topics throughout our weekly podcast that will be focused on coaching and leadership. Throughout our weekly podcast, Coach Smith and I will not only share our experiences, but will engage with hugely successful coaches, executives, and athletes, and top-notch leaders to discuss their experiences, philosophies, and thoughts on coaching and leadership. Combined, Coach Smith and I have over 75 years experience leading athletic teams and programs and have both successes and failures, and surely have learned a great deal from both that we want to share with all of you. So, Coach, just wanted to say hello, and why don't you share with our audience how we arrived at this exciting initiative from the locker room and what we want to accomplish.
Well, Doc, how you doing today? You doing good, I hope?
Great, Mike.
Yeah. Well, this has been a journey like anything in terms of you and me getting together and having an opportunity to spend time, socially, and then bouncing things off about, different subjects. And we decided that we were going to try to do something and give back. Coaching to me is the greatest profession that there is. And I think that we have experienced both good and bad, a lot more good than bad, but we can talk about it and hopefully give some insight to other coaches, business leaders. Doesn't really matter what sport you're coaching. We're going to give people an opportunity to hear from different people that have been very successful, and also allow us to interact and just talk about it. We're two old gray-haired guys that are going to have an opportunity to spend some time chatting.
Well, I think that's right. I think we've both been very blessed to have the careers that we've had. We've had the ability to really engage with a lot of people and learned a whole lot as we've gone along. And like you said, we've had a lot more probably good things than bad things happen to us, but I think we've learned from each and every experience that we've had, and hopefully what we can share with our audience is some things that will keep them from making maybe some of the mistakes we made and, be even more successful than we were. So I think it's an exciting initiative, and I really appreciate you, and I know you have so much to offer. And I guess, one of the things I'd like to kind of hear from you is, how did you really get into this profession? How did you really decide to be a coach?
Well, I'm a son of a coach and an educator, and coaching and educating has been part of my life since I was very, very young. I can remember as a young 5- and 6-year-old going to practice at Seabreeze Junior High and being on the sideline, being the water boy, being right in the middle of it, being in the locker room. So I've been around it for a long, long time. My father was probably my biggest influence in terms of showing me how to interact and be a coach. And I knew early on. And then when I was in high school, my senior year, I had an injury, broke my arm in the second game of the season. And my high school coach was very influential in my life, Coach Phil Rehart. After breaking my arm, the first week I was going to miss a game, he asked me if I would be interested in going to a high school game with our next opponent and go scout them. So I can remember getting in the GTO and driving 35 miles to Pearson Taylor High School and doing my first scouting as a senior in high school. And then as the season went on, and I had an opportunity to work with the JV team. So Coach Phil Rehart really was the guy that gave me my first opportunity to coach. But, I want to tell everybody out here, coaching is the greatest profession that there is. Coaching and teaching, and it's often overlooked, and we need to share our ideas with one another.
Yeah, Mike, I agree so much. I was very fortunate, and I didn't really have a clear path into coaching and getting in the world of sport. I kind of fell into it. I was playing, I was in the Army and playing basketball in the Army and got hurt, and kind of the same thing. We had a really good team and I got hurt, and I think I got demoted from being, the starting point guard to the head coach of the team. We went on, we won the First Army Championship, and it just kind of got in my blood. And I guess when I started, it was about the excitement of coaching. After a year or two, it really kind of turned into, how am I helping these young men become better? How am I helping them learn and be the best that they can be? So I think, it's kind of funny how I think it was just kind of fate that I got into coaching. But, like you and I have talked about, besides my parents, all those individuals who have been such an influence and really have been mentors for me have been coaches. And I know you kind of feel the same way.
Oh, absolutely, Doc. We've had these discussions around the table after a round of golf, after we've of course paid our debts, and I've paid them to you more than you've paid them to me. But that's a whole another subject. But we know how important it is for coaches to connect with people. I've said this many times. I can tell you every coach I've ever had, starting with Hal Burr in midget basketball, going on to David Russell and George Russell that coached me in midget football. But I can't tell you, honestly, unfortunately, who my fourth grade teacher was. And teachers are important, but I think that coaches affect youth and affect everybody that they touch, no matter at what level, in a different way. It's just a special bond.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that has made me so passionate about wanting to share and help coaches is the one story that just sticks in my mind. It sticks in my mind all the time. When I was a high school basketball coach in Cincinnati, I was opening the gym in the summer, and I got there early, and our campus of our high school was very large and was kind of the community-based facility for all youth sports also. And I was just wandering around our campus, and I saw this youth team practicing. These were like 10-year-olds, and they had a coach who weighed about 280 pounds, and they were doing this tackling drill. And there was this little kid who was really afraid. There was two lines. One guy had the ball. The other kid was supposed to tackle him, and the kid was afraid. He'd kind of run up there and turn his shoulder, and you could tell he was scared. Well, the 280-pound coach, he starts really getting on this kid, calling him a collard and a chicken. He said, "You do it right," and the kid just, next time he did it, same thing. And this great big old guy, he says, "Here, you take the ball." And the kid takes the ball, and this big 280-pound guy tackles this poor little kid. And the kid's helmet flies off, and, he starts crying. And I'm just thinking, man, if there's something I can do to keep these kind of things from happening, of just helping to share my thoughts and help people understand the importance of coaching kids and doing it the right way, that's what I want to do. And so, I've been very fortunate to be able to, start a few programs that have helped. But I know you kind of feel that same way of sharing and giving back to, coaches and people who are in leadership roles.
Yeah, and Doc, I think sometimes we forget how impactful we can be as coaches, and we don't realize that everybody's watching us as a coach. It doesn't matter if you're the assistant linebacker coach at a small college, or the head coach of an NBA basketball team, or a major college team. Guys are looking at you, at everything that you do, and we are really affecting them, not only in the sports world, but how they're going to react to situations in their life. And I think, besides my parents, probably the most influential people that have affected my life have been coaches. And that's why I want to give back and make sure that we're helping coaches understand, first and foremost, how important they are. And secondly, to realize how they can affect and they can change things that are going on in young people's lives.
We've both been really lucky to be involved with some really great coaches, that we worked with, or, I've been fortunate to, deal with guys like Jeff Capel and Anthony Grant, Chaka Smart, and Steve Forbes. And I know, you've worked with some great coaches, and you worked with some great players who were great leaders. It had to be really exciting to work with guys like Ray Lewis and Matt Ryan and Tony Gonzalez. But I mean, we talked a little bit about one person who really, you kind of worked with and really picked up some really great thoughts from. Who would that be?
Well, he's very close to me, and there's been many, but Brian Billick has probably been the biggest mentor for me in terms of coaching. We started working together at San Diego State. I was a very young coach. He'd been in the business for 4 or 5 years longer than I had. And Brian was a great communicator. Watching him communicate and collaborate, not only with the staff, but the players, and he made everybody feel like that they were part of the process. And I know everybody uses that word right now. It's the big buzzword in coaching and in businesses, trust the process and go through the process. But he was probably the biggest influence for me once I got into the profession. And one of the things that stood out with Brian was he was not afraid to put together a bunch of type A personalities on a coaching staff. The staff that he put together in Baltimore had guys like Marvin Lewis, Rex Ryan, Jack Del Rio, Mike Nolan. And you can imagine what kind of meetings we had. But Brian was James Harris, who was our assistant general manager there. He said he would just want to stand outside the meeting room with the staff room to hear us scrimmage. And I said, "What do you mean scrimmage, Shaq?" And he'd say, "Yeah," he says, "it was about as intense as a practice, in fourth quarter of a game." But we knew that we were gonna be able to be who we are and go out and communicate with one another. And Brian was a guy that he was a great communicator and great talker, but he listened to everybody in the room, where everybody felt like they were part of the decision-making process that we were going through.
I think that's one of the things that some people get a little bit confused with about communication. And I think that's a great point. And I have, as we go through, our podcast, we want to leave always 2 or 3 takeaways with everybody that listens. And I think that's really a great point that you brought up about Coach Billick, was that he was a great communicator because it was a two-way communication. It wasn't only him, sharing his thoughts. He was taking in, communication from his staff and from other people, and then kind of aggregating all that and coming up with, the actual message and plan. So I think that's pretty interesting. The one thing, and, of course, your book, You Went in the Locker Room First, has a lot of really great points in it. And of course, writing that with John Gordon had to be a really neat experience. But the one thing that, I kind of learned that from that, and when you talk about communication in a large organization, is that you did a lot of individual communication. Can you talk a little bit about that when you took over the Falcons?
Yeah, absolutely. As stated in the book, when I took over the Falcons in 2008, they were going through some really difficult times. And unfortunately, in this business, Doc, as you know, usually when you're taking over a program, you're not taking it over because the coach retired and went off and rode off into the sunset after winning 3 Super Bowls. Occasionally, a guy's moving up, but in the NFL, if you're taking over, it's because they didn't do a good job or there were some underlying facts. And when I got to Atlanta, one of the things that was a big issue was there was poor communication. And I believe this, Doc, the best communicators are not the best orators. They're the best listeners. And I think that that's one of the things that you've got to do. And I think when you get into a situation where you have to communicate with people, first you've got to listen to them and listen to their issues, because we felt like we needed to start from the bottom up and grow our culture that we were going to have there in Atlanta. So it's important to collaborate, not necessarily communicate. And sometimes I interchange those words, because when you collaborate, you're working with the other person and they're also getting their points across. So I always like to say, hey, we want to be good collaborators and not good communicators. And I think walking the building and walking the room, and I know you know that it's important to hear how everybody feels, but you want them to know how you feel, and you not let them know how important they are to getting the program where it needs to be.
Well, I think, certainly culture is so important, but like you said, I mean, I think you kind of got to get in there and get a feel for, what people are thinking. And until you do that, you're just kind of whistling in the wind. That was the one thing, I always talk to our staff about. I'd ask them, well, what are our donors thinking about? Or what is this particular constituency thinking about? And they'd say, well, I think they think this. And I said, well, if you ask them, have you talked to them? Or is that just your impression? So I think, what you say, you need to get that input. You need to really hear what people are thinking. And I think, of course, your personality is such that people are comfortable sharing that with you, So I think that's the way you approach people is certainly going to be important too.
Absolutely, Doc. And I think an overlying theme that everyone has to understand is that when there's a void in communication and collaboration, negativity is going to fill that void, not positivity. And that's one thing that I think that happens is leaders are sometimes afraid to communicate up front. They want to read the tea leaves way too much. And I think what they need to do is they got to make sure that there is that open line of communication. Maybe the decision making's not being made, but you've got to be communicating and collaborating so that they understand that they're part of the solution if it's a problem, or they're part of a new idea. And the one thing I think we all have to understand in organizations, and I think it's a topic that we could spend a whole lot of time with on another podcast, is how do you maintain it and how do you adjust and improvise? Because in the world of sports, in the world of business, it can change just like that in a snap. Especially in athletics, it changes every year because it's a new team. Guys graduate, guys move on, and we also have to deal with injuries. So we've got to be prepared to improvise and adjust. So we want to have a process in place, but you also want to be able to adjust. The people that are nimble-footed and nimble-minded and are getting that information, as you know, Doc, you talk about donors and people that are part of the program on the outside and being very important to it. You've got to be nimble when you're dealing with those.
Well, I think that's so right. And I think, you had told me that story, I guess, when you were, the linebacker coach for the Ravens, I guess, when you guys won the Super Bowl, and how, Ray Lewis would kind of step forward with his leadership style and make sure that, kind of everybody was on the same page. That had to be a pretty cool experience to see that.
Oh, it was very impactful for me as a coach to have a guy like Ray Lewis in your room, on your team. And my favorite day of the week was coming in on Wednesday after Ray had been working Tuesday, and he would actually work with the group, and it ended up being later on most of the defense would go to his house. And I was so interested and so excited about getting his input. And when you got his input from a player's perspective, then you can put your twist on it, but at the same time know that the players have really taken to it and are invested in the game plan for this week or for the game plan for the off season. And that's what you've got to do as a leader, is that you've got to identify the people that are great communicators and you've got to empower them. And sometimes the best leaders are not necessarily the guy at the top of the food chain. Sometimes the best leaders are the guys that are in the trenches, in the foxholes with everybody else. And I've been in both places, and I've seen it go both ways, as you have as well.
I think one of the things that kind of brings to light with that is one of the things I know you talk about a little bit in the book is, you want to eliminate the gray, and it sounds like, that's a real process to do that when you have those people empowered and they're communicating with each other.
Oh, absolutely. I think as players and as people, we want to know whether it's black or white. You know, we want yes or no. Can I do this? Can I not do that? How can I proceed? Well, if you're going down a slippery slope, or what I call the gray area, players and assistant coaches and people in the organization, they want to succeed. They want to do their job. They want to do it the right way. They want to do it well for everybody on the team. So they really want to know what their job is. And you've got to define it and let them know these are the expectations. This is how we're going to do it, and get feedback from them. And sometimes that definition changes from week to week. As you know, there could be an injury and a guy that's a backup is now in a very pivotal role that's going to have to be played for the rest of the season. And we got to make sure that those guys are prepared both physically, mentally, and intellectually to handle that. And that's what good leaders and good coaches do.
You know, I think it's a great lesson to be learned from athletics. Just like you said, I think every player and every coach knows what the expectations of their role is on that team. You know, they know, you know, if they're the quarterback, what the expectation, wide receivers, they know what they're supposed to do. And I think so often in organizations, we sometimes don't really communicate to, you know, the people within our organization exactly what their roles are, what the expectations are. And, you know, and then just like in athletics, I guess we kind of need to hold them accountable.
Absolutely, Doc. As you know, accountability is one of the most important things of being a good teammate, being a good athlete. You know, I used to tell the guys all the time, there's all kinds of abilities, you know, and you're here because you have abilities, but really the ability that I want to make sure that you have is that you've got accountability and reliability. Those are the abilities. It's not really what you do on the court or on the field. It's, are you accountable and are you reliable? And for people to be accountable and reliable, they got to know what their job is. And I think that's really as the leader of an organization or leader of a team or leader of a unit, that's what they have to do. They've got to make sure that everybody knows what the expectations for them are every week, every day, and lay it out for them and continue to reinforce it.
Well, it's so true. If people aren't sure, then they're going to not be confident in what they're doing, and then, you know, they just don't really buy in. So I think, you know, those are really important points.
And Doc, and the buy-in, and I know you've seen it within the organizations that you've led. Talk to me a little bit about, you know, how do you get buy-in?
Yeah, well, you know, buy-in, I mean, so much of it is communication. I think it's having, you know, a really good plan, communicating the plan, and people feeling, you know, I think there's two things that are, and we're probably getting off the topic a little bit, but I think there's two things that are incredible, that are incredibly important. One is trust. They have to trust you as a leader. They have to trust you as a coach, and they have to feel that you're competent. So if they trust you and they believe in you and have equity in you as a leader in there, then they feel that you're competent, and then I think they will buy in. And I think, you know, those are the critical pieces. And then you have to let them know that we're in this together. And when you have those things come together, then I think you really have a successful organization. That's clearly very kind of a very quick and concise thought, but I think those are pretty critical components.
I do too, Doc, and I look forward to having that conversation in another one of our talks together, because buy-in and getting buy-in, I think, is one of the most critical things. And I'm anxious to hear, because of your experiences through all the different athletic organizations that you've been with, getting buy-in, Doc. And once you get it, it's amazing how powerful it is.
No question. No question. Well, I think we're probably going to wrap this up here, Coach. And like you said, we got a couple takeaways, you know, that I've kind of written down here, and you may want to just kind of expand on them. First, communicate with people individually. I know you did that when you took over the Falcons.
Yes. probably the biggest thing. You've got to walk the building. I know we'll talk about walk the building down the road as well. These are all subjects that I think that we've got to get into. But you got to walk the building, and you've got to let them know that they're not the problem. They're going to be part of the solution, and you've got to let them know that you're there to help them do their job easier and more efficiently.
And then, you know, the second thing I hope everybody realizes, communication is a two-way street.
Absolutely. You know, and I, again, as I said, sometimes I like to use the word collaboration, because I can communicate with someone, I can communicate with a guy, or I can communicate with somebody and say, hey, gosh, this is the way it's going to be done. And that's really not the type of communication that you want to have. You want to have collaboration where it is a two-way street. And we're both saying the exact same thing. If we have that collaboration, we're going to build those relationships, and those relationships are going to get stronger, and they're going to help us in hard times.
And then I guess the last one I think is really important is communication eliminates the gray.
Oh gosh, yeah. You know, hey, black and white. And one of the things you want everybody in your organization to be doing is they want to be singing out of the same hymnal. You know, one of the things I knew early on in Atlanta, when I heard players saying the things out in the media that I was saying in the meetings on Monday and Wednesday, I knew that we had a good group of guys, because you have to be on message and you have to be on point, especially in today's world that we live in. You know, there's so much information out there. You want everybody in the organization and on the team not saying it exactly how you say it, but making sure that the theme runs through the entire organization and the entire team.
That's great, Coach. So I think we'll probably wrap this up once again, just in summary. Remember, you know, communicate with people one-on-one. Remember that you got to listen to them if you expect them to listen to you. And finally, you know, eliminate the gray. Make sure everybody understands perfectly what the message is. So I think this was a great first session. In our next session, we're going to have a special guest. We'll get that information out to who's going to join us next time. But I hope everybody will come back, and this is just going to get better and better. I really appreciate you, Coach. I really enjoyed the conversation.
I appreciate yours, Doc, and I look forward to doing it again here real soon.
Thanks, Mike. See you, everybody.